When people think of the greatest Sonic games, titles that often come to mind are Sonic 3 Knuckles, Adventure 1 and 2, and of course the beloved Sonic Generations. But one title that is highly divisive whether it's up there or not is the subject of today's video. Sonic Unleashed has undoubtedly great ideas and reinvents the way you can even play Sonic in the third dimension. But others feel with every 2 air boosts forward, there is a giant knockback of Empire City. But today, having never played Sonic Unleashed before, but having played Generations as well as being a huge God of War fan, this just seemed like a huge hit for me. And was it? Well, I'd certainly say it's definitely up there, but just not at the top shelf. So let's get on with this review, shall we? 2008, the year of Wall-E and the birth of the MCU, and also the subject for today's video. Coming hot, or should I say dead and cold off the heels of Sonic 06 and Shadow, Team Sonic really had to pick it up. Looking at their last critically acclaimed games, Adventure 1 and 2, Heroes, the Advanced Trilogy, and also Sonic Rush. Now, why did I bring this up? Well, Unleashed takes ideas from a few games, the atmosphere of Sonic Adventure, the scale of Adventure 2, and finally the gameplay of both Sonic Rush and the Godslayer himself. Like I said in my last video, when the Dreamcast first ended, most of their games were ported over to the GameCube, garnering a large Nintendo audience. But when it came to the next console generation, Nintendo, instead of competing in the Rome Coliseum that was the console wars, decided to join a league of their own where they couldn't be competed with. That was the family market. And because of that, their hardware wasn't even close to the PS360s of the world. Meaning that the games Sega developed for the 7th generation of consoles now couldn't reach their newly established Nintendo audience. So Sega looked and thought about it. They were going to split the Sonic franchise into a few directions. First off, like Mario, Sonic's 2D legacy would live on in the portable market, and his family games, such as Secret Rings and Colors, would be on the Wii. And the big Alpha Chad games were reserved for mainly the modern day consoles, which is Sonic 06 and now Sonic Unleashed. But really, why did Team Sonic choose out of all the possible gameplay styles to the hack and slash redundancy that was the late 2000s? Well, again, this was meant for the adult gamers. They felt that maybe shooters wouldn't fit the series, although to be honest, I kind of enjoyed Shadow more than I did Heroes. If you're curious about my thoughts on that video, you can go check out my video in the top right corner. But nonetheless, the most popular genre outside of shooters at the time were action games. God of War, Devil May Cry, Dante's Inferno, Bayonetta. There are countless action games released at the time. If you don't know, there's a stark difference between an action game and a God of War ripoff. Mainly it comes down to these mechanics: a light swiping attack, a hard straight attack, and a special grab attack, as well as blocking. Mixing these buttons, giving different combos, and I'll get into more of the similarities later, but just know this isn't an action gameplay style. It's specifically inspired by God of War. But lastly, there's one more new component to this game: the boost formula. Although not new to the franchise because it first debuted in the prior title I mentioned, the Sonic Rush series, giving blinding speeds with analog control while also carrying over a trick system from Rush, and on top of that the drop slam and other previous abilities such as the slide, lightspeed dash, rail grinding. It was truly a fantastic idea. So that's the backstory of Unleashed, but what's the in-game events that turn this into this? But real quick, I honestly don't get the hate. The series is about a blue hedgehog that goes fast and turns Super Saiyan with Trunks and Vegeta after being kissed like Sleeping Beauty by a human. Hashtag me too, Sonic. Me too. But yet then becoming a werehog with stretchy limbs is pushing it? Like, who cares? I don't care. You shouldn't care. But alright. Nonetheless, this game starts up with the closest we are ever going to get to an animated Pixar Sonic film. Just gorgeous. But Sonic eventually gets captured, gets the emerald stolen from him, the Chaos powers get stripped away from the crystals to power Dark Gaia. But if you don't know, Gaia means Earth in Greek. And oh look, another God of War parallel. After the Dark Gaia energy gets released, the Earth gets split into 8 fragments. And now at night, Sonic turns into a werewolf and Dark Gaia spirits now roam the Earth. Shockingly, this isn't scaring the shit out of humans, or at the very least, sending them spiraling into an existential crisis. But instead, do you want a hot dog? I find this absurd and pretty funny sometimes. And also, the way humans look are just perfect for the Sonic universe. Light years better than Adventure 2 and Sonic 06. But yeah, the rest of the story is just finding this guy so he can tell you where to go for the temples, which help restore the Chaos Emeralds. And these temples are located in very diverse environments, which heavily resemble real countries, but I'm assuming for legal reasons, under different names. Other notable non-gameplay aspects of this game is the presentation. And I know I just got done playing Project 06, but this is just as beautiful as that game. It is still jaw-dropping for the modern day. Although I did emulate this in upres and put up some max settings, but because emulation isn't perfect, there are a few drop frames, stuttering, and other graphical issues in the footage, so I do apologize for that. And on top of the bliss that makes my eyes climax just after the first look, the music is eargasmic. I know it's not rare for Sonic games to have great soundtracks. Hell, Adventure 2 is in my opinion one of the greatest soundtracks ever, but Unleashed just has its own atmosphere. There is a sort of grandness to it, something so great and epic. And each track just fits the vibe this game is going for. Put this side by side with the art style and you have a complete product here. And again, borrowing from Adventure 1 are the adventure fields. These are essentially tiny little hub worlds where you can interact with the locals, varying in size. And then a secondary part of the area, which is the level select. Think of it as a warp room from Crash. Typically, each zone has 2 levels for each gameplay style. There are some exceptions, but mainly there are 4 levels in the boss fight for each zone. But there are also additional missions from the hot dog stand, which are essentially challenge levels. And also, there are side missions from the Samaritans around. And to help add to this Pixar feel, the voice acting and cutscenes surely do help. Eggman is back in glory from a subpar appearance in Shadow and 06. In fact, I'd say this is my favorite portrayal of him outside of Adventure 2. But sadly, I really dislike Chip in this game. He's quite annoying. And Sonic is pretty good. I find his night voice to be pretty goofy, and that's probably on purpose. Another upgrade from 06 to this game is the cutscene quality. Gone are the days with the
chaos control.
Yeah, like I went over earlier, this game is basically a short film. And yeah, I guess the dialogue isn't on point like Ratchet & Clank, and maybe the scene direction isn't as good as Portal 2, but they're pretty enjoyable. So we've gone over the production, story, presentation. What's left? For one, these mini hubs are just a bit too small. I find myself getting claustrophobic in many locations. In comparison to the Mystic Ruins, this is a far cry. Also, largely, people mainly have 2 problems with this game. The werehog, and my problem, the performance. No, I did say I was emulating this game at 1440-60, but this was a huge issue on the original hardware. On top of that, I emulated other games and had next to no issue with the 360, meaning the optimization for this game had its own hardware that was very much lackluster. The Hedgehog engine is probably why the performance is so bad in general. But one last inclusion before getting to the gameplay, the amount of ports Unleashed has, but yet still no modern releases, has got to be a world record. Sonic Unleashed has not only multiple ports, but multiple versions. As you know, the HD version is on Xbox 360 and PS3. I'll refer to this as the PS360 version. But because the PS3 was weaker hardware, and in my opinion this is the only time Xbox was ahead in the console wars, its port is often looked down because it has much weaker performance. And another version some people know about is the Wii, which is a completely different game, although maintaining the same general principles. But obviously, the game isn't nearly as long, with the graphics just being far worse. I'll get into more of the differences later, but also, a lot of people don't know about this. The Wii was basically the specs of the previous generation, but with just motion controls. So, they decided to also port that version of the game to the PS2, which is funny, being that the PS3 came out 2 years prior. But there is a secret version of Unleashed for mobile, or should I say previous mobile devices. Yeah, this game was quickly taken off. I believe it was removed from all platforms. But the way most people play Unleashed nowadays is either through the Xbox emulation where you can just put in the disc, or Xenia, as myself. But there's one final way you can play Sonic Unleashed, and that's Sonic Unleashed Project Redux, which is porting all of the Unleashed levels over to Sonic Generations, giving all of the great levels with the improved handling and performance of Generations. This runs natively, so there's no weird emulation issues that come along with the way I did it, and also removes all the Werehog stages and also the Sun and Moon medals. And really just the preferable way for most to play it, and I highly recommend playing this mod. But that doesn't mean there isn't a reason to play Unleashed. But with that being said, let's finally cover the gameplay in this damn game review.
Here we go!
So many people feel that the boost formula is a bit automated, and I used to feel that way too. Old school Sonic games rewarded you with speed, but if you can just go to max speed by pressing a button, then where's the fun? In my opinion, it comes from maintaining that speed. The old 2D games, it is nearly impossible to keep speed because of enemy placement, bullcrap level design, or just by failure to see the future. Some prefer that, but I find the boost formula to be very exciting, reacting quickly to obstacles, doing snappy movements, just overall very satisfying gameplay. And the thought that boosting makes these games automated or easy is far from the truth. Now, I'm not gonna lie here, alright? I'm not very good at Sonic games, but I got my ass beat in these day stages, and I'm told the DLC levels are way harder. So that argument is just false. And it even being possibly boring is just also not true. Yeah, sometimes there's just a straight line or loop-de-loop. That's oftentimes to show the environment or the scale of the stages that you will eventually complete or have completed. But because of the controlling changes of Sonic, the level design has to also reflect that. After Adventure, the levels had been getting more and more linear with an exception of 06. But here, the levels are just go. Yeah, there are shortcuts for sure, but there are rarely branching paths that take you to an entirely separate level. Oftentimes, these are just paths for time savers, or they might just take you to a rail above everything, essentially just saving time. But I don't think this is a negative thing at all. Of course, it takes away some player expression, but all it does is raise the roof for the skill ceiling. But this isn't without flaws. Oftentimes, my biggest issue with the classic Sonic games is that it requires omnipotence to avoid objects in the future. And while nearly every obstacle in this game can be avoided off reaction or reasonable prediction, there were certain parts of levels that did legitimately need the power to see the future. And even then, there was still a part in the Middle East level where even then knowing about this hole, after dying to it, it took me several attempts to dodge it. Using the split-second timing requires, and also because the game forces you to go super fast at this section. Maybe this was an issue in the emulation, although I don't see how it could, but I found this pretty jarring, and the worst level design in a game with a really good stage structure. But I found another issue with this game. Obviously, you just can't rip all the mechanics from Sonic Rush one for one because this game is in 3D, so they added a few new moves. The quick step and drifting. Drifting is pretty self-explanatory and also a really good idea, but the way it was handled in this game is just far too loose. Oftentimes I found myself being flung off edges because I couldn't handle the turning too well. And additionally, the quick step was a really good idea that was handled pretty well except for one thing. If you've played endless runners like Subway Surfers or shit, just probably from ads, then this game mechanic will come very natural to you. The game will lock you into aisles while going fast, sometimes on a rail, other times it's running from something, or avoiding lasers. You get the point. So instead of focusing on turning, speed, and level design, your focus is to press the corresponding button to change lanes while avoiding the incoming attack or bomb. I found this to be really fun on levels like Jungle Joyride, but the issue sometimes arises when the level design didn't take into account of the distance that Sonic goes. Oh my god, say that 5 times fast. On Skyscraper Scamper, this is a specific tunnel that the lanes and bombs are just too big for you to avoid by doing one sidestep. And this was also an issue in other levels. But most notably, while on the wall, I found Sonic did not even move properly or consistently. Again, in Empire City, there was a segment while on the wall that just didn't work properly because of the failed mechanic. And my most frustrating part was during one of the last bosses I faced. I was supposed to dodge these attacks and or bombs, but yet the sidestep just wasn't sidestepping. Clearly, Sonic needs a lesson from Kazuya in this department, but again, getting back to the bosses, these are by far the best bosses in Sonic yet. Although again, nothing super great like other franchises, they're still fun. Just again, reactions, quick timing, and speed. And talking quick times, they decided to change how the trick system works from Rush while also changing how the jump pads from Adventure and 06 work. Now there will be a button prompt to press while going through a trick ring or when jumping from pad to pad. And there's a little sweet spot to press the buttons that I think gives you the most points. And I say think because honestly, I feel great is better score-wise than nice because the colors and great meaning more than, nice. But even with these minutest of issues, I find this to be some of the best Sonic levels I've ever played. I know I keep saying that the Adventure titles, 06, and Generations have some of the best Sonic levels ever, but don't worry, Unleashed is up there, if not surpassing most of them. From running away from a whale, to falling structures while you're running through the Sahara Desert, having robots chase you and laser you down, running through Italy. All of these are a thrill to run through. But because the Werehog section is going to be pretty long, let's dial it down for the speed sections and talk about the help worlds. I have 2 issues though. You have to go to talk to Mr. Pickle every time you need to go to a new level. So let's say you finish the level in New York, and then you have to go all the way back to another area, which means a loading screen just go talk, which means you have to go through another few loading screens. Even though you'd only think this would be bad for repeat playthroughs, I still found this annoying because on the world map, the areas glow yellow when you have to go there to finish a level. So Mr. Pickle is really just completely useless and just an inconvenience. And I know I just said I like the minimaps, but the fact you can die and lose lives in them is absolutely stupid. This, on top of Sonic controlling pretty bad at low speeds, just gets really annoying in small spaces or places where there is an endless abyss. And yeah, Sonic plays really bad at low speeds. But luckily in the main stages, you're going fast nearly all the time, and it controls pretty well. But trying to get medals is just pure annoying. And talking about the medals, there are sun and moon medals throughout every stage, which are required to play more levels. Now this is frustrating. This is just like the entire Rayman 1 fiasco. We have to get a large percentage, if not all of the medals, just to play the game more. It makes sense for collectathon games like Jak, Spyro, and Mario 64, but playing these levels are hard enough. Having to explore these huge stages with crappy low speeds gets pretty annoying. But luckily, since I was emulating, I could mod the game. The mods I installed were the No Medal mod, PlayStation buttons, homing attack on jump, battle music removal, and the flashbang fix. These are basically all required for the best experience possible with this game. Unless you're an Xbox guy, which in that case just don't have the PlayStation buttons. Anyway, back to the fact, these Sonic levels are just great. Truly some of the best in the series. My least favorite was definitely Empire City and Shamar for both day and night. Mainly because those were levels that the new Sonic mechanics weren't fine-tuned enough. And also Shamar was just the longest fucking level with the werehog, with this stupid little area which was full of annoying enemies that I thought you had to beat, but then when I found out it was just fake trap, and Empire City was just an emulation nightmare, which isn't the level's fault, but what is the endless abyss from getting knocked off or just a single fail for platforming. If I seem a bit negative, don't listen to me. Because if you already have Generations on PC, I highly recommend getting the Unleashed project. In fact, now that Shadow Generations has already come out, my first buy of Sonic Generations is now just the Unleashed project, while I have the proper Sonic Generations to play in Shadow Generations. And I mean, I don't really know what to say. These levels are super good, the environments are really diverse, I have some small issues here and there, but really this was a fantastic debut for the Boost gameplay. So now it's time to talk about the werehog in the room. So, like I said, this was very God of War inspired. But let's answer the question of why it's more comparable to that rather than a game like Devil May Cry. Well, at that time, Devil May Cry mainly had two buttons for attack. The long range weapon and the short range melee weapon, typically being a sword. That system focused around long, difficult combos with one huge gimmick: style and diversity. What I mean is the swagger the combo, the more points. More launchers, multiple enemies, no damage taken, really just being the coolest human being on the planet. And also diversity, meaning using multiple different combos. What you don't know, the combos were to change based off the timing of your pressing. Let's imagine you press the attack button 3 times, one after another. You'll get this basic combo. But imagine you hit twice, delay, then attack. Then you'll get a different combo. This is basically the basis for how DMC works. Yeah, there are special moves you can do while locking onto an enemy, then holding a direction, and then attacking, which will give you moves like the Stinger or High Time, but God of War wanted to be different. Don't get me wrong, it is still definitely inspired by the Devil Hunter himself, getting weapons from beating bosses, red orbs, slaying creatures, but Kratos controls way different. His attacks are a light swiping attack, a heavy straight attack, and a special action which is typically a grab or ender, blocking, and then a dodge roll. Small puzzles with light platforming, and a whole lot of quick time events. That is the God of War formula. But I'd probably say the biggest difference between God of War and Devil May Cry are the weapons. Obviously, they both get more weapons, but their signature tools are completely different. And this goes over to the gameplay a lot. Kratos is often focused on AoE and large swarms of enemies. Not really style in these combos, but just a billion hits because the Blades of Chaos are swinging, allowing them to go far out and hitting enemies. While a sword is very focused and typically 1v1. Anyway, why does it all matter to Sonic Unleashed? That's because I basically just explained to you how a werewolf plays compared to other action games. We have a hook attack, which is a light attack with a large Z-axis hitbox. A straight attack, which is higher damage but doesn't hit multiple enemies unless lined up back to back, and something else nearly every single action game has is their rage mode. Here, it's aptly called Unleashed mode. It increases damage and speed, but weirdly, they also added a run button to Sonic, allowing him to pounce. This is all fun in my opinion, but may I warn you, it starts off very boring. You only have 4 ground combos. The best combo at the beginning of the game, which I found until later and was super shocked about it, is straight jump, straight special, which ends with an Azuna drop. But after the end of the first level, you can start to pour XP into your stats. Again, directly taking from the previously mentioned action games. Although not red and not orbs, so I guess a little different. After beating enemies, you get experience, which can be used to upgrade your stats for either the Hedgehog or Werehog. I recommend pouring most of it into combat because each upgrade gives you a new move or combo, and the price for most upgrades don't inflate as easily as the other stats. I poured most of my XP into combat, then life, and then damage, and then Unleashed. Of course, in the late game you get a lot of points. And when the best stats are super expensive, I just poured a few into little ones like shield, top speed, and ring energy. And quickly after the first level, you'll find out the Unleashed gameplay is really fun if you like action games. But if you hate combat in games, I recommend to honestly just play the Unleashed project. I can't recommend the down ports because I haven't tried them myself, but getting back to the main PS360 version. How the moves work in this game is like this. Imagine a string with 5 possible parts. You first start off with 4 that are just all matching the same button. But then you'll eventually unlock attack A, then attack BB. Or then you'll go attack AA, then BB. Eventually there's a combo at every step until the cap at 5. Sometimes you can add a jump in there to make the combo a launcher, which then gives you air combos with the same formula that I just gave. But there are also moves from holding down the attack or while running. And you can even do moves from shield, which can be performed like how they do in classic God of War. As you see, this can get overwhelming pretty fast, and I love it. Although it's not required to do diverse combos for a higher score count, I still do it for my own eye candy because a lot of these attacks are pretty cool. And this brings into question what the special attack does. Well, by itself, it's just a grab button to throw enemies. Or even if they're dazed, you can perform a finisher by doing some quick time events. I didn't use these too often unless it was the B enemy or the Gaia bosses in the late game because they just have so much health. And speaking about the enemies, there is barely any enemy diversity. Everything is a basic Eggman mech, basic Gaia creature, a wizard, a bee, and sometimes these ghost things. And every once in a while there are tiny robots or cool Gaia creatures. Like, why do these Gaia dragons never come back? And I believe there are only 2 kinds of mini bosses in this game. And the small quote-unquote puzzles in this game are just time wasters. But the platforming can get really fun with the new double jump and swing. But problems arise when the lock-on target for the grabbable things are not very consistent in the range. And also when the swinging momentum doesn't carry over like how you think. You can definitely get used to it, but it's still just weird. But I mean, there are a lot of God of War inspired obstacles with a mix of Nathan Drake in here. I find it fun except for this one inclusion that just They added tight walking sections into many of these levels, and most of the time you can't grab the ledges, meaning if you fall, you fall. This mixed with a very annoying camera makes for certain just literal risks of fate. If you thought Crash Bandicoot was hard, imagine not even having a downward perspective, and boom, you have half of these parts. And yep, the camera does suck quite often in this game. Within the day and night sections, there are no free camera. You can lean your view a bit, but overall, it's basically a fixed camera. But Game Owner, doesn't God of War and Devil May Cry 1 have a fixed camera? You're dumb. Yes, they both do have fixed cameras, at least in their early games. But the difference is, for one, Kratos was also able to dodge roll as well, which is not a mechanic Unleashed. And also, that game did not require the tight platforming this game needs. And if there is, the camera makes up for it. And also, early DMC games did have problems with platforming. The only time I found it fun and functional was in the reboot of DMC. But yeah, that's why. These games were never focused on platforming, and if they did, at times they compensated for it. But again, time after time, the camera never shifted properly, but even if it did, there was still no drop shadow. But enough with this negativity. These Werehog levels were really fun. I really enjoyed them. I liked most of the platforming. I love the combos. I just don't like the lack of defensive and evasive options. A bit more speed or frame perfects would have really helped with what many feel is monotonous. I really liked it, but oh man, by far my least favorite levels were the Savannah and the Empire City levels. I know I spoke a little earlier, but Empire City was mostly fine, but my emulation was just absolutely bugged out, and there were visual artifacts everywhere with texture explosions and just basically a seizure happening on screen. It's actually a miracle that I beat the stage. But another problem is with the ending, specifically the boss. Now, because of all of these issues, I lost a lot of lives from just not being able to see. Most of you probably know what I'm about to speak about, but the last boss is the hardest mini boss, which is fine. But all of his attacks have huge knockback, and since you're fighting on top of a tower, there are obviously no handrails, so once you get hit, you die. And I had 2 lives when I reached this boss. But no worries, with my skill, I beat the boss on my second attempt just playing the lame game. And with the longest non-final level was by far the Savannah level. Not only did the level just keep going, but also because of this section right here and the enemies alongside with it. The bees are just the worst. They dodge nearly every attack. You can grab them and throw them against the wall, then get a few hits in, but by the time you figure that out, you've already wasted 30 minutes. And it's not even a guarantee to kill them. Grabbing or finishing enemies is very finicky. They have to be standing properly, and you have to be facing them, and it's just random whether you can or can't. And there is a part of this level that I kept going back to because I thought once you beat it, you get one of the stones to unlock the next door. And yes, they have boring stones where you have to pick them up and put them down. And also, funny enough about these, you can only walk while carrying these, but while on a tight walk, you can run, meaning you move faster while on a tightrope carrying a stone than you do just normally carrying a stone. Overall, I think the Werehog was a fun idea. If there's ever going to be a sequel, I can see them refining these edges and producing possibly not only the best Sonic gameplay, but also the best secondary gameplay this series has ever seen. I really enjoyed it, maybe not as much as the boost levels, but still great. Now, the finale of this game starts off with a tornado level. After that, we reach Eggman Land, which has been built up for years now. And Eggman finally did it. And this is a gauntlet. This level took me, I believe, over an hour and a half to beat. You switch back and forth between Hedgehog and Werehog forms, and this is where being able to level up your stats mid-level comes in real handy. And this shit will test you. And even though I was getting 100 rings and secret lives from time to time, I was always on my last string. I genuinely think I lost a year of my life due to that stress. The platforming, enemies, obstacles, it's truly that end of semester exam you need to pass. And at the end, of course, you have to fight 2 of the Dark Gaia bosses, with wizards that heal them. But I'm gonna go at action games, so that part was no problem. Then you gotta fight Eggman as the Werehog while he's in the Egg Dragoon, which sadly was actually a really forgettable boss. But then the real finale. We travel to the core of the earth to fight Dark Gaia, and it turns out Chip is really like Gaia. He assembles all of the Gaia temples to become the Colossus, and here starts one of the most boring yet frustrating parts of the game. Dark Gaia just throws boulders that are sometimes just impossible to dodge. It takes forever for them to be thrown, but I feel the amount of time you have to try and dodge is very low. But you are able to hit and break the boulders, but that takes such precise time you might as well just block and take the hit. And the hitboxes are very wonky. It's just bad. But once you reach it, you're able to play as Sonic for like 10 seconds, and then it just repeats until you go Super Sonic, where it again plays pretty boring. And yeah, that's the end of the game. The Gaias go back into Earth and everything is fine, despite the Earth looking like a mashed ball of different colored Play-Dohs. And also Sonic says he'll wear Chip's bracelet despite never showing up again in any other game. And what's the conclusion of this game? Well, Sonic Unleashed is damn good for not only trying out a new gameplay style, but for trying out 2 new ways to play. Yes, there are minute issues that are just kind of baffling how they still got in. Truly, this game was ahead of its time, and the hate is not deserved, but the criticism definitely is.